feature on YouTube again. Can't forget it.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of VCCLive. This is episode 49, and tonight we'll be talking about 4 more years. And Greg asked me to put a little asterisk behind that, so we'll talk about what the asterisk means. Asterisks, however you say it.
I was going to say we should probably call it by the correct name. Asterisk.
We'll get it close. Welcome everyone tonight. We're a few minutes early, which has only happened a few times in VCCLive history, so... we got everything worked out, and Greg is joining us by audio only. That's why I have this cool picture of him that I pulled off of his Facebook. Don't worry, Greg, it's a professional one saying President, American Vaping Association. So I didn't get one of your younger years ones.
Or one from San Francisco this weekend.
Or one from San Francisco this weekend. No, I didn't. I wouldn't do that to you. So, Jay, what's been up, man? How's things the last week?
Good. Very busy. And obviously, sleeping a little bit easier over the last week, but like I'm sure we're going to talk about tonight, there's a big asterisk to what we're going to talk about tonight. But no, definitely sleeping a little bit easier. Maybe I can actually replace my roof this year and not feel too guilty about it.
That's good. Yeah, I'm sure a shit ton of small businesses across the U.S. breathe a sigh of relief. Again, we're going to get more into the details of it. But Greg, tell us what you've been up to this last week. I know it's probably been crazy for you. You were out in San Francisco. What were you out there for? What were you doing?
Sure. I flew out Sunday morning at, I believe, 6 a.m., maybe 8, to San Francisco. Believe it or not, the first time that I had ever gone out to San Francisco. I'd gone to many parts of California, but San Fran was elusive up until then. And we did a press conference Monday morning in front of San Francisco City Hall. As many of you likely know, last month the Board of Supervisors passed an ordinance banning the sale of all flavored tobacco and nicotine products within the city, regardless of age limits, regardless of even if it's just menthol. Banned. And so over 34,000 signatures were collected to put the ordinance to the voters of San Francisco rather than the supervisors. And so long as those signatures check out and we obtained way above the legal limit or the minimum number, we have great confidence that will be on the ballot in 2018. So we did a press conference, spoke. We had some good vapors show up. And starting to build the campaign, which we will be a part of, to actually really get the message out, not only about harm reduction, but also about how San Francisco and no other American city needs a new prohibition.
Right, and I'm sure that you guys will be, well, I mean, if it's going to be going to the voters through a referendum, I guess it's kind of goes without saying, but flavors definitely help adult smokers transition from combustible tobacco to vaping. So that was a stupid move on their part. But I hope what I hope doesn't happen over the next year before the voters of San Francisco get a chance to vote on that referendum is other cities across the country following suit. So that's something we need to be mindful of for sure.
Yeah, the model in other cities and states, not states, but cities, up until this point, like in Providence, Rhode Island, I believe Cleveland, various cities in Massachusetts, has been that flavors, usually excluding menthol, are restricted to adult-only retail establishments, which is offensive, which is not a good idea for public health, but nonetheless is better than San Francisco's solution, which is just shut down the existing stores, period.
Right. All right. Well, that's what Greg's been up to. And, if you want to follow what he's doing there, what they're doing with San Francisco, make sure you follow him on Facebook. And also you can find the American Vaping Association information on their website, vaping.info.
It's .org now.
I'd like to say what's up to everyone in chat. Thank you guys for joining us live. We appreciate it. Don't forget to hit that like button down below there. If you're watching on the replay, also hit the like button and share this episode of VCC Live. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of great information in the next hour. So, yeah, if you have any questions, also throw them up in chat. I might not keep up with them. Jay will look at them as well. We'll both kind of try to keep up with them as we go. But if not, we'll scroll back through and look at them. So, yeah, the big story of the past week, probably ever in the history of the vaping industry in the United States. Last Friday, the FDA, relatively new commissioner, Dr. Gottlieb, and the FDA have come up with a new approach to harm reduction. And I think I'll just want to say at the beginning, our quote tonight is one of the things that he said last week in the press release. It says, "The overwhelming amount of death and disease attributable to tobacco is caused by addiction to cigarettes." So it's good to see that there's someone in charge of the FDA now that actually gets it, that it's about harm reduction, that there is a spectrum or continuum of risk or whatever they're calling it, and that electronic cigarettes are at the safer end of that spectrum, and cigarettes, combustible tobacco, is at the deadly end of that spectrum. So that being said, Greg, what is your take on the FDA's approach, the new approach to harm reduction as their mantra?
Well, when the news came out, like probably everyone listening to this, there was a great feeling of excitement. We'd been fighting and warning people for years about the possibility of quick and painful prohibition through the deeming regulation. Even before the deeming regulation ever came out, many of us were saying, hey, when this comes, it's going to be a pickaxe to the back. And for years we've been fighting it. To have someone come out and recognize that this system is not ideal and could actually be harmful was huge. I had been hoping and waiting in great anticipation for about 2 months, month and a half, since Gottlieb had been confirmed for the position, waiting for this to happen, and was very satisfied, to say the least. But at that time, I had to have my couple moments of great happiness, and then look at the big picture, look at how you need to present it to the media, because if, as in this case, there are things coming down the road in possibly the next 4 years and beyond that could be very bad for vapor products. So you don't want to go in with this attitude of everything is saved, let's celebrate, nobody worry about anything, because this picture that Dr. Gottlieb pointed, very optimistic, but not every element could go the way that will actually benefit harm reduction.
Right. Well, I just want to point out at the beginning, 4 more years, what that means is it gives us 4 more years to do things that need to be done, and that doesn't shut the industry down immediately. First off, the predicate date did not get changed. It needs to be changed. So we need to continue supporting HR 1136 or the Cole-Bishop Amendment, which I don't know, you probably don't listen. I don't think you have time to listen to VCC Lives, but I've been saying for a while since I heard of Gottlieb's nomination that I thought we were going to see some administrative relief before the end of the year. I was thinking October, November, so it came a little sooner than I thought, but still, that's great. And so the predicate date, we still need to push for that change, and everything that was in effect as of August 8th is still in effect. The only thing that got changed was the date of submission for the PMTAs and stuff like that. So it wasn't a be-all and end-all thing. It just gave us breathing room. It gave us time. Jay, what do you think?
Correct.
What do you think about that? You had a chance to look at all of this stuff over the last week, Jay?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. This gave us a temporary reprieve. You know, it's like a stay of execution, essentially, as it stands right now. It gives us time not only to kind of get all our ducks in a row as an industry and community as of now, but it gives us a chance to grow our numbers even further, and hopefully attract more passionate former smokers and current vapors to the cause to help us all fight.
And Greg, do you have anything to add to that? I mean, is that pretty much your perception as well? It's a stay of execution kind of, but we have a long way to go.
It's a stay of execution, but perhaps only for some companies. We will see, because part of Dr. Gottlieb's presentation was the intention, I believe, to issue an advance notice of proposed rulemaking on vapor product standards. And so it's possible that those standards, if they are developed, go through the full rulemaking process, et cetera, that by the time that's over, the effective date would not be until 2022. But product standards can be used if the FDA wants to, and if they want to move swiftly, to take out some level of actors in the market. So, for example, if they adopted, and this is purely theoretical, if they adopted AIMSA's current standards tomorrow and had to take effect in 2 years, then 2 years from then, if you couldn't comply with those standards, you couldn't remain on the market. But the hope is that the standard system will actually be something that almost replaces the PMTA process in 2022.
Right.
You could have a system where if you are abiding by standards, if you are pledging to do X, Y, and Z, you can file a different form of PMTA.
Right, and also Dr. Gottlieb covered in his speech, and again, I don't have it pulled up, and I'm not going to flip over today to the full screen and read things to you guys. I'm sure most of you have seen it by now, and if you haven't, I'll post links in the description for the video when the replay is up to the FDA announcements and stuff like that. But they did touch on flavors, and they're going to be doing some, they're going to be looking for input from the public and from the industry, I would assume as well, on flavors. Can you kind of cover a little bit, Greg, on what he meant by that, and what do you think? What's your interpretation of that, and where do you think that we might head?
Well, what's notable, and if someone wants to contradict me, they can go back to the FDA's original proposed rule. Feel free. But I believe this is the first time that the FDA has formally asked the question about the role flavors play in helping adults transition away from smoking.
Right.
That is significant. Because if you look back at that proposed rule, one of the critiques that I had of it, the one of the catalog of 9,845 of them, that the FDA asked so many questions that were overwhelmingly negative about vapor products, not searching for benefits, but searching for reasons to take negative actions about them. So that is a sign that it is time for the industry itself to get more data on the role flavors play, because they could come up with all the bad science that they published in journals regarding youth and flavors. But if you can point out the lives that are being saved, that can counterbalance that. The good news on flavors is that the advance notice of proposed rulemaking that could come out, there's a possibility it could never come out. OMB, I believe, has to approve such proposed rules, even at the advance notice stage. So it could just be held, and then this was all just a speech. But it's going to take a while. There's time to develop science. Some of us are working on those projects now, trying to get more in the literature, because the way that flavors are going to be saved is now. There's going to be partly a political portion, but it is going to rely a lot on science as well.
Yeah, my interpretation of that was that they're looking more at flavors as they appeal to children, not so much of the harm or the harmful or potentially harmful constituents, more of their propensity to attract children to vaping.
Politicians don't care about science.
Yeah,
they care about politics and public perception. That's
well, I mean, that's another aspect of this whole thing, is because another focal point that I heard, and there were a few things that kind of I pricked my ears up at when I heard him talking about it, and I heard his whole speech, and one of them was labels. And there's a push which is not public yet, but there's a consumer push that will be unveiled probably within the next couple of weeks. And I think we as an industry need to use this opportunity to kind of grow up and weed out the players in the industry who are doing IP infringing labels, who are doing cartoony and child appealing labels. And it's not just something that people are saying now from within the industry. This came from the lips of the commissioner, Scott Gottlieb, during his speech, and that is they're going to be taking a hard look at this. What do you, Jay, what do you think about that? Do you think that it's going to have an impact? Do you think people will listen? Do you think it will make a change?
First of all, like I said, that's not a scientific-based approach to policy. That's a PR-based approach to policy. It's a politics-based approach to policy. That's not to say it's not real. Right. I fully expect them to use that type of ammunition in their arguments against flavors. Certainly. I mean, how can you use that as an argument for flavors? You can't. So I'm still hopeful, and a lot of us who have been around a long time still apply industrial and community-based pressures to these companies to not do that kind of thing. Unfortunately, you've got a lot of people in the industry who are 20 to 25-year-olds who are running their first business, who are getting a lot of positive attention from their friends and cohorts to keep releasing these brands.
Do you think a consumer approach to saying we're not going to take this shit anymore? Do you think that will work?
I think we're getting to the point now where the trendy part or the trendy wing of vaping in general is starting to wane. So I think a lot of that may end up weeding itself out over the next year anyway. But that's just pure speculation on my part.
Greg, what do you think about the label topic that Dr. Gottlieb brought up during the speech? Do you think it's going to be a crucial point over the next year to 2 years?
I'd certainly much rather labels be a crucial point than the agency trying to define the difference between cookies and cream and cappuccino as to whether or not what is acceptable. Right. There are different facets of this to understand. The first and most important thing that needs to kind of overlie this debate is that to the people that want to destroy this industry, the labels themselves aren't so much the problem as the very existence of something that is flavored chocolate or flavored cherry. Even something as simple as cherry is offensive to these people. So good luck with more exotic things. But if the FDA feels the need to go after something, labels are something that would make much less dire consequences for small and medium-sized businesses than virtually anything having to do with flavors.
Right. I agree.
Right. The cost of creating a new label on average is probably 3 to 5 cents a bottle, depending on your throughput as far as revenue. Whereas the cost of eliminating your ingredients, a huge portion of your ingredients from your arsenal, that's that can spell closing your business.
Absolutely.
There are interesting First Amendment concerns with policing labeling. Mm-hmm. FDA existing rules that relate to cigarette, smokeless tobacco, etc., sponsorship and T-shirts and such have been upheld, but you may start to run into issues when you start saying that a cartoon of a president, as the state of Oregon has said, the cartoon of a president is unacceptable, but something else may be. So that's just a fun legal nerd thing that may result from all of this.
Well, isn't it true that the government cannot trademark?
I believe that is true.
Yeah.
I think that's why I think the CIA tried to threaten somebody for selling hats or something, and they failed. I may be wrong.
All right, so we did have one question in the chat before we go too much further from... trying to find out where it was. From T-Bolt says, I guess what I'm asking is, will this bring up statewide regulations faster? So what do you think the impact of the extension to 2022 for the e-cig industry will have on statewide regulations, states and cities, and how they're going to react to it? And do you think that it's going to, make it accelerated process in states and cities, or what do you think is going to happen there, Greg?
It's an interesting question. I suspect that I'll rephrase, one of the benefits that the industry has had, depending on your perspective, over the past year and a half or so, is that our opponents' number one main priority, the public health interest group's number one priority, has been Tobacco 21.
Mm-hmm.
This probably won't change that as their number one focus. Then you have the state legislators, and their number one focus usually is money. Filling holes in budgets is where we usually get screwed. This won't impact that. But when you're in certain states, and there's only 14 states right now with Democrat legislatures and Democrat governors that are more susceptible to this talk, but the whole thing of the Trump administration has delayed these rules to protect our children may play well in one or two or three of those 14 states, so you never know.
We have a comment, and I just saw a comment on the video that I did last Friday from this person, Alias Ooze. I'm not sure who they are, but the comment that they put on last week's video was, surprise, surprise, surprise. I looked up some of your activity. You've been busy and part of the problem. I guess they're talking about me. I haven't figured out if you are already linked to Big Tobacco, but I've just started, and then they continue on this rant. I'm not really sure what you're talking about. I'm absolutely not linked to Big Tobacco, and VCCLive is not propaganda or social engineering. It's just some folks in the industry trying to share education and knowledge to the general public so that hopefully people get involved as consumers and as business owners, so that we can promote vaping as a harm reduction tool to combustible tobacco. My end game is to eliminate combustible tobacco from the face of the earth. So how I would have any ties to Big Tobacco, which I certainly do not, other than I spent tens of thousands of dollars over 15 years smoking and giving them money. That's the only tie that I would ever have to Big Tobacco. So not really sure what you're talking about there, Alias Ooze, but if you have any questions, you can certainly contact me directly, admin@vapingcc.com. I'll be happy to answer them, maybe even call and talk to you, but yeah.
And anyway, let me speak to Mr. Ooze for a moment.
Or
Mr.
Mrs.
Ooze.
Not sure if that's Mr. or Mrs., but the Ooze.
You do not have to fear Big Tobacco so much as you have 100 times more to fear from Big Public Health. And that's coming from somebody that's written an editorial called Big Tobacco's War on E-Cigarettes. Big Tobacco is an easy target, but it is the public health groups that have been trying to destroy this industry since 2009. So refocus some of that energy, especially since we're in 2017 and going forward. These companies are actually putting out products that are going to be helping smokers quit, whether or not we like it or not.
Right.
So I'll get off the soapbox.
Yeah. And just to clarify, I have also no ties with Big Pharma or public health. So anyway, this is an education show.
I have ties with Stanton Glantz and several others. They follow me.
Yeah, I'm afraid they're probably very stressed ties. I bet he was shitting bricks last Friday. Anyway,
are you kidding me? He's guaranteed a job for the next 5 years now.
Yeah, I guess so.
He was going to be out of work in 2 years. Otherwise,
so long-term implications. Let's switch gears a little bit. Long-term implications. What do we need to be doing? What do we need to use these additional 4 years that we've been given as a gift from the FDA? And again, I know that might be overstating it slightly, but time is the most valuable resource we as human beings have. It's something that you can't get back, and something no matter how much money you have, you can't buy it. So we've been given a great gift, I think, by the FDA of time, and I just want to help people prioritize what we need to be doing over the next 5 years and the additional 4 years, both as consumers and within the industry. What do you think, Jay? And then we'll go. Greg, and then we'll go to Jay and see what you think about that. Greg, what do you think? What's the focal point? Give us maybe like a short laundry list of things that we need to be focusing on over the next 5 years.
The industry needs to become more mature, and that includes some of the labeling issues that have been brought up. The industry needs to continue or increase its fight at the state and local level. The industry needs to publish science on flavors, and we need to get this product back into the spectrum of harm reduction and away from 19-year-olds blowing clouds. That is how we're going to change things. That's the focus, along with campaigning to continue to change that predicate date or change the regulatory system. If you want further reform at FDA based on the concept of harm reduction through non-combustible products,
right,
you need to get the public on board with that.
Jay, what do you think? Do you think that Greg kind of hit all the high points, or is there anything else you would add?
Well, he really did, and I would just expand and say that a lot of that stuff we're already kind of seeing going on. You know, we're starting to see less, at least at the national level, as far as I'm seeing on social media and such. We're starting to see less of, you know, the flat brim sleeve tattooed crowd thinking that vaping's really cool and posting a whole bunch of cloud chasing vids and cloud comps and all that stuff. I've already started to see that kind of wane over the last 6 months to a year. So a lot of that, I think, is just kind of happening organically. But what I would concentrate on is, like Greg said, the state and local fights. I still see a huge vacuum that needs to be filled as far as organization at the state and local levels. You know, here in Massachusetts, we've been tearing ourselves to shreds over the last 5-6 years, trying to get a stable advocacy organization settled. And I'd like to say that over the next year and a half, we'll be able to get that all stabilized, but you know, I can't make any promises. You know, we're doing the best we can here. You know.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, there are always going to be, just like in the vaping community proper, there are personalities in the advocacy communities in their respective states that end up banging heads, and that can be detrimental. And you know, nowhere is that more apparent than I've been seeing in Massachusetts over the last few years. So we need to get that stuff ironed out, certainly, because that, I firmly believe, and it's just speculation on my part, but I firmly believe that because of this announcement, the state and local ordinances are going to start coming fast and furious over the next 6 months or so.
Yeah. I would say probably my prioritization list would be get HR 1136 or some version thereof, something that would change the predicate date. That would be probably still the top priority. And then we need to, as an industry, like Greg said, grow up. But I'm not talking so much from the PR standpoint of 19-year-olds blowing clouds. I'm talking more from the industry standpoint of labeling. And we definitely do need to compile data on flavors and something scientific, not just a bunch of people saying, yeah, flavors help me quit. We need some scientific data that we can produce charts from, because that's what these folks want to see, something quick and easy. You show them a pie chart that says 95% of vapors indicate that former adult smokers who are currently vaping indicate that flavors were a major choice in them deciding to quit combustible tobacco, and that's going to have an impact, and that's something that nobody's done yet. And then to carry on... Well,
CASA did do that.
Recently,
but we need more of that.
Yeah, we need more of that. I mean, we need recent, current, updated data and charts and stuff to show them when we're going to meet with them. And I think too, I definitely agree that the states are going to ramp up their. Again, it could go two ways, like Greg was saying earlier, which I agree with. It could have an impact where the states are saying, "Oh, wow, the FDA took a step back, so." Maybe vaping isn't something that we really need to be attacking, but I think we're definitely going to have states, and especially cities like San Francisco and others across the country, saying the FDA is not going to do it, we're going to do it. So yeah, if you don't have a state organization already in your state, try to get something together to, again, there's plenty of people out there to ask for help on how to organize a state organization. It's not easy. It takes a lot of time and it costs a lot of money, but it's definitely worth it to have a lobbyist on your side in your state capital. So make sure that you're working on doing that in your states. If you already have an organization and if it accepts both industry and consumers, make sure you join that and support them. Trust me when I say there's never enough money. And I know, there are people out there that say what's happening with the money, and there are watchdogs that are keeping an eye on it, which is a good thing, I think. I mean, there should be an eye kept on it. But it costs a lot of money to have a lobbyist and do all the things that you need to do in a state. When you look at how much money is made in the state of Florida, for instance, I would say in the tens or hundreds of millions of dollars per year, based on the vaping industry being here, the lack of support and the apathy towards the Florida Smoke-Free Association, which is the only one that's really doing anything in the state of Florida, is pretty disheartening. So that's just one example, and I'm sure it's the same in every state. So yeah, that would be my list of things that we need to be working on over the next couple of years. Definitely need to change up the labeling and the way that works, and I think we're going to have to see some consumers with an approach that's going to work for that, so that's a good thing. Any other questions in chat, or do you have any follow-up on that, Greg or Jay?
Nothing in particular.
No? Okay. What's up, everyone who's joining us a little bit late? Thank you, guys. We appreciate it. Make sure you hit that like button down below there. There's a lot more people watching right now than there are that have liked it. We even have our first dislike before the video ends, so sweet. I'm assuming that was probably Ooze before he bolted, if he's not still here. So, thank you guys for saying we appreciate it. Any questions or anything from anyone in chat? We have a half an hour left, and like Greg, you have anything that you want to talk about for a few minutes specifically that you've noticed over the last week, or anything else that we haven't covered already?
Well, it is really important that the word gets spread, especially to the smaller time manufacturers, that September 30th remains the deadline for registration. Right. And that the further deadlines also remain in effect. One such deadline that the FDA needs to put something out about to start informing people of their obligations is the HPHC, harmful and potentially harmful constituents deadline, which is far away, but some work hopefully is going on behind the scenes to make that process something that is attainable, maybe something similar to what is required for product notification in the EU, or less than that.
Okay, so can you kind of expand?
There's also a health certificate.
Health document submissions should be fairly easy for 99% of this industry. Mm-hmm. If you have not developed health documents or have health documents on your product, you just check a box saying you do not have health documents.
Just explain really quickly here for those folks that may be watching live or maybe watching the replays over the coming weeks, what exactly is due on September 30th? What is required of them if they don't know already, or how can they find out more information on that?
FDA's timelines on their website are actually not terrible, and they are truthful, and they are you can comprehend them, unlike some government documents. September 30th, if you are a manufacturer, you must register your facility and file a product listing for all the products that you manufacture. Mm-hmm. If you are a vape shop that is selling products made by others, devices, liquids from other manufacturers, etc., you don't have an obligation.
Okay. We do have a couple of questions in chat, so I'll make sure I will... I'll read a comment from Joshua. He says, I personally think states are still going to try to screw us as fast as they can with either taxes or bans. Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't see that going away anytime in the near future. Again, it may not be all the states. Some of them might say, well, the FDA is held back, so we're going to wait and see, take a wait-and-see approach to what the federal government's doing. But then again...
See, I don't disagree. I just don't think... I don't think for taxes... this decision won't impact much. It's a good talking point when having meetings with legislators, but ultimately
if they have an $800 million budget hole and they need to find $8 million, their zeal to fill that with an easy tax will remain the same regardless of what Gottlieb's decision was.
So yeah, taxes are probably going to be the biggest thing over the coming months and years that the states are going to be trying to implement. Again, they're trying to fill voids where declining cigarette sales are definitely leaving a void in their coffers. So that's something to keep an eye on. I'll try to answer a few of the quicker ones before we get into some of the ones that are going to take a few minutes. What about products made after 8/8? That was not affected by this. Again, the predicate date did not change, and any new products are still subject to the FDA's processes on products coming out post August 8, 2016. So that did not change one bit. New products are not technically allowed on the market. That's how I would answer it. Greg, do you have anything to add, or Jay?
There's been a lot of hope or anticipation that the FDA would be going after these products made after 8/8, and I have been informing people until registration occurs, FDA isn't really going to do a thing unless they have a sworn affidavit of someone admitting that they're marketing a product that came out on the market after 8/8.
And that was going to be my question. How do we anticipate enforcement could and would happen as far as people releasing products after 8/8? I mean, to me, it just seems ludicrous with the sheer number of manufacturers out there that they would have anywhere near the personnel and resources on hand to actually enforce that ban, for lack of a better word.
Ooze is still here with us, and he or she is chiming in. They're saying, convert, no quit. I'm not sure what that means. Don't like vaping, but I support your rights. We appreciate that, and certainly I echo that from all vapor standpoint. Again, this is not so much a fight for vaping as it is a fight for our freedom to choose how we choose to live in the United States of America. And if I choose to vape, I don't want the government to put restrictions on a product that are as onerous, if not more onerous, than what's freely available with cigarettes. I chose to smoke for 15 years. I found something better. We should have that right as adults in the United States to make that decision. So that's kind of where we're coming from our approach here at VCCLive anyway. You have to ask other people what their approach is. But my brother actually asked a good question. Do you guys think lowering the nicotine in cigarettes will help people to convert? That was one of the talking points from Dr. Gottlieb's speech last week. What do you think about that, Jay? Do you think that's propaganda? Do you think it's actually something that's they're going to do?
Well, there are two different schools of thought here, and there's going to be a bit of tinfoil hat going on. So maybe I should take off my Patriots Super Bowl LI champions hat and put on the tinfoil. But no, I mean, on one aspect, you're talking about reducing the level of nicotine in cigarettes, which tobacco makers, were doing 20, 30 years ago. And essentially they were accused of making people smoke more because they reduced the nicotine in the cigarettes, right? So people were smoking more, therefore doing more damage to their lungs to get the same amount of nicotine into their lungs. What would that look like if they reduced the nicotine to the point where you weren't able to, sustain your craving for nicotine? Cigarette sales could, in theory, go through the roof, right?
Right.
Because people would just keep smoking more and more and more and more. And then the MSA agreement, all those numbers would start to get fulfilled again because people were buying more cigarettes. I don't know. Like I said, this is kind of tinfoil hat territory for me. And at the same time, Dr. Gottlieb's stated reasoning behind it was to turn people on to safer alternatives, be that smokeless tobacco, snus, things like that, or electronic cigarettes, as stated. So to me, that's a net positive. So how am I to interpret that? I'm not sure. My mistrust of government is kind of at odds with my trust for what Dr. Gottlieb has had to say.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know how to interpret this, honestly.
So what do you think, Greg? What do you think it was lip service? Do you think it's something they're actually going to do? or what's your
It's a
take on
bad idea, and my hope is that it doesn't come to this, and I ultimately don't think it will. And even if they were moving full charge ahead, I think it would take a decade or more to actually be implemented, because you're talking about changing the crops in the ground and changing how they're grown and what kind of leaf it produces across the entire United States. That is not an easy thing to do. So I think only those that believe in the phrase, the ends justify the means, can really think that this is a good idea, because no matter what scenario, along the way, you're going to be killing some people, to quote, save some lives in the future. If you do gradual reductions, you're going to have people inhaling harder and sucking more tar into the lungs,
right.
Or possibly smoking more cigarettes, but the inhaling harder seems more likely, depending on how large the reduction. Or if you do the rapid, like, okay, it's 2020, all of a sudden your cigarettes are 99% less nicotine or 80%, you are creating a black market that is going to be putting people in prison, people disproportionately of black and brown races, and that is a direct harm of prohibition that the FDA would be bringing about.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful that this won't come to pass.
Actually, Ooze actually made a valid point, and I'm going to read it real quick so we can talk about it. They aren't going to reduce the price or the taxes. I'm assuming he or she is talking about cigarettes. I absolutely agree with you. Historically, you can see a rise in cigarette prices based on taxes from either states or localities. So I think the price of cigarettes is going to continue to rise across the United States. And then they say, think of all that revenue. That's absolutely correct. If they reduce, and like you said, like you guys are saying, if they do at some point end up forcing tobacco manufacturers to reduce the amount of nicotine that consumers are getting through their cigarettes, that is going to increase the amount of smoking and or push them to less harmful alternatives. But I think for a certain percentage of that smoking population, it's definitely going to cause them to smoke more, which therefore means more money for the tobacco companies and more money for the state and local, state and federal government in tobacco taxes. Right. So that's a fair point.
And that was exactly my point. And I would also like to kind of posit the question: when Dr. Gottlieb talked about this new policy, we're really just talking about, at this point, opening it up for comments, much in the way that they did, a couple of years ago for electronic cigarettes. Correct?
Right.
I mean, that's really kind of where we are right now. They're getting ready to accept public comments on lowering the nicotine strength of cigarettes. Period.
I think that you can clearly see every state and locality that raises the price of cigarettes via taxes. It's always their excuse, which is a bullshit excuse, that their goal is to reduce smoking. It's not. Their goal is to increase their tax revenue. That's what their goal is.
Right.
So, and again, that's why I have such I'm such a staunch opponent of any taxation on vapor products, because they're not a sin product. They're a less harmful alternative to combustible tobacco. So I don't even think 1 cent per milliliter is acceptable. I think we oppose everything. Yeah, I mean, that's a discussion I think we're going to be having. I think it's something that we don't have a dog in that fight as a vaping industry or as vapors. So I think we need to leave that up to Big Tobacco and the FDA to hash out what happens with the lowering or potential lowering of nicotine in combustible tobacco cigarettes. So I say we have enough of our own shit to focus on over the coming 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and we need to focus on doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I could be wrong, but I think you're right. I think us attaching ourselves, it wouldn't behoove us to start fighting on behalf of Big Tobacco to maintain their nicotine strength in cigarettes. It would just be a PR nightmare. Right. Philosophically, I'm against it. I'm against 98% of all federal government regulation. Period. But yeah, is that where we want to start putting our resources into fighting for Big Tobacco's right to maintain
we have
their
enough to do.
nicotine
We already have
strengths?
enough on our plate for sure.
Yeah.
So the question then again from Moose, do you think that they will raise taxes on e-cigs at some point, regulate the level of nicotine too? If you look at several jurisdictions across the country, they've already instituted taxes on e-cigs, and I think we're going to continue to see an onslaught of that.
I think at the federal level, we're still a long way off from anything like that. But certainly at the state and local levels, that we've already seen that. The precedent has been set, and it's been successful in a lot of states. We're going to continue to see that, if we don't get our shit together and start organizing. Yeah,
I would echo your comments too on anti. I'm against probably. I don't know what percentage I would put it at, but it's a pretty high percentage. I think the federal government regulations should be extremely limited in their scope and breadth for sure. Not speaking for Greg, this has nothing to do. Greg, sometimes we get off on tangents and start talking about political things, but anyway, that's kind of neither here nor there with what we're talking about. But it does go with the we're anti-regulation for the vaping industry, except for very few things. They should say bans on sales to minors. Absolutely agree with that, and some sort of safety standards in manufacturing, and that should probably be about it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Let's see. Jennifer Berger Coleman says a few minutes ago, she said, "Hey, Greg," I think she had some caps. I can't find it now, but yeah, she was happy to see that you're here. Oh, she said, "Greg."
Wonderful.
Greg with a wave.
I got to see Jennifer at the San Francisco press conference.
Haven't had the honor of meeting her yet in person, but hopefully one day. Let's see. Any other questions? Yeah, it says someone pointed out that the TPD in Europe limits nic levels to 20 milligrams. So, yeah, which is, counterintuitive if you think about the harm reduction aspect of it, where, I think I saw a Dr. Farsellino's study from a few years ago saying that the nicotine absorption from electronic cigarettes is less than that of combustible tobacco. So you would think that new people who are changing from combustible tobacco over to vaping would need higher levels of nicotine, at least at the beginning. So the 18, 24, or 36 range would be something that smokers would appeal to smokers, and then they can lower that nicotine level at their choosing if they don't want to. I've been at 12 for 3.5 years, I started at 18 and I went to 12. So about 3.5, 4 years I've been at 12, and I don't intend on going down. I mean, I like what I vape.
So. And there was just some science published positing that the people using higher nicotine actually end up exposing themselves to less toxicants and chemicals.
Because they feel they need to vape less frequently, I would assume?
Not only that, but they have the heating. You're heating it for a less period of time because you don't need to produce such a large cloud of vapor, so it doesn't have the opportunity to form the byproducts, which it should be noted are even when you are using the lower nicotine products, the byproducts, as long as you are not getting a dry hit, are still likely of no real concern. But still, to regulators, the fact that you can say, hey, the higher nicotine, the lower the toxicant exposure, that is potentially a positive.
Right. Absolutely. That makes perfect sense.
It does.
That's what I'm here for.
Thank you, Greg. We appreciate that. Very thorough analysis. All right. Well, we've got about 15 minutes left. If you have any questions, throw them up. If not, we'll kind of go over what's happening over the immediate future. Greg, what are you up to over the immediate future, the next couple of weeks, months? What's on your agenda?
Well, at the end of August, from August 21st to the 28th, I will be getting back on the road, myself in a rental car, doing 5 cities in Montana, my Truth About Vaping speaking tour, and 1 city in South Dakota, Rapid City, South Dakota. The original idea, I did this last year in Mississippi, did 6 days, 6 cities in 4 of the 6 markets, got press attention, mostly about FDA, but also 1 or 2 stations was about encouraging the Mississippi Health Department to tell the truth about vaping rather than just mislead the public. And thought it went well, connected with vapors, and hopefully inspired some of them to advocate more. And originally with Montana, the idea was Senator Tester, a moderate Democrat, was and still remains a target for fixing the predicate date. In light of Friday's ruling, the theme of the show is not so much stop the FDA as it is a broader focus of advocating biggest myths about vaping, what you can do, etc. But after that tour, hoping to do more. You can get in touch with me if you're interested in having it in your city. One initiative that I have been working on is trying to get into colleges through some groups like Students for Sensible Drug Policy and some GOP or conservative organizations. That's something that's in development where you can try and connect with people who are in college, who are the future of America before they are spoiled by people who get in their ear when they get involved in politics. And there's plenty more on the schedule, but those are the two most pressing things at the moment.
I have just a quick follow-up question. Why Montana? Why Montana and Rapid City? Were you requested to go there, or is there some need for you to go there?
Well, Montana was Tester.
Okay.
Senator Tester. Rapid City, the weekend that August 8th of 2016, there was going to be a show in Rapid City, South Dakota, which is right like a 3-4 hour drive from the last stop on our Billings tour. And they canceled the show because once the deeming reg came out, people suddenly did not want to spend money going to a convention in South Dakota.
Right.
So I knew that there was a very passionate group out there that would get people to the show. And there's a decent vape community there. There's probably 4 or 5 stores, certainly more than 1 or 2 of the locations in Montana. So why not? And we'll get some good video footage to hopefully do some promotion for some other shows. I know we have interest in Kentucky of getting down there. I have good hopes that we'll get some good media attention while we're there.
Travis asked, which states are being hit the hardest with regulations and bans, and which states are doing well? So can you give us maybe a quick list of states right now that are facing some regulations and bans that people maybe need to get more active in?
Well, California, of course. The Bay Area at the moment is a hotbed for flavor activity. Unfortunately, the Bay Area is also a land without a great amount of informed vapors. I was in San Francisco this weekend before, went to a festival of sorts to walk around, and the first 3 vapors I saw were vaping pot.
Wow.
So okay. I got that look in my eyes like, oh, it's it's pot. So that's a difficult area. Massachusetts is always a problem, as your co-host noted.
Yeah.
There's always local things going on. Fortunately, right now, at this very moment, the vast majority of the states are out of session. So there are not too many pressing threats, but there are generally there are states that we are always on high alert about: Vermont, Alaska, Massachusetts, California, Washington, Oregon. Those are New Jersey. There's always
specifically too about Michigan. What about Michigan? Is it anything happening there?
Michigan is a difficult state. You're the only state, along with Pennsylvania, technically, that does not have a minor ban for e-cigarettes, and that is because back 3-4 years ago, we passed a bill to ban the sale of vapor products to minors in Michigan, and the governor vetoed it. Why? Because it did not define e-cigarettes as tobacco. Mm-hmm. And the public health groups convinced your Republican governor to veto it. Right. And the Republican legislators that control the House and the Senate, meanwhile, have pretty much just said, okay, if the governor won't sign a bill defining these that doesn't define these things as tobacco, we just won't pass a damn bill. That's how it's been. A group of 8 or 9 Democrats sponsored a bill led by a guy named Henry Yanez earlier this year to tax e-cigarettes at some absurd rate, 70, 78%, something like that. And there's a great group of Michigan vendors that have gotten together and done some great lobbying work. I am hopeful that that bill will never receive a committee hearing, but you can never say never, unfortunately, when it comes to tax money.
Yeah. I just want to remind you guys, if you're watching and you haven't hit the like button, please make sure you do that. Again, we have more people watching than we do have liked it, so please make sure you take it a second to do that, and also share the replay once I get it up on the Facebook page tomorrow. If you're not a member, just search Facebook for VCCLive altogether. You'll be able to find us pretty easily. So we're doing, and I'll ask you about this really quickly here since you're probably familiar with it, Greg. The next VCC event will be a B2B only trade show in Chicago, technically Cook County. It's in Rosemont, where they had the B2B only events in 15 and 16. But they didn't come back this year, and I don't think they're coming back. The organization that did those trade shows, they're actually trade shows, not conventions. So we're going to be doing business to business only for the next B2B event. And I've had some questions from potential exhibitors about holding a trade show in Cook County. And based on my interpretation of the ordinance there in Cook County, it's mainly geared towards consumers, transactions, taxes, and stuff geared towards consumer transactions, not business-to-business transactions. But what I've been advising people is if they have any questions about it, just take the order and then process the sale when you get back home on the weekend or on Monday, because the transaction technically hasn't occurred in Cook County. Do you have any input on that?
That would be my advice, to just keep them as far out of the equation as possible. There's some question to be had about the fact that, I assume there will be sampling
but business
going
to business,
on, or
no consumers will be in the building. Everyone will be part of a business, so it would be. And again, that's not regulated.
I mostly read that law just to see what the tax rate was, because I already knew there's no changing any of the language because it was Cook County.
Right.
So
it specifically says consumers.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is a good sign.
Yeah.
Then good.
So any other questions before we wrap things up? We're a few minutes, we have a few minutes to go, but we'll just wrap it up with I don't see anything right now, but someone says that they're not sure why, but they have a craving for ribs. And Greg, you can't see it, but Jay's backdrop is a big rack of baby back ribs. So I'm actually kind of hungry myself now after looking at it for an hour. Jay, what's going on over the next the weeks? How has this impacted, just really quickly, how has it impacted your outlook with Hingham Hill, your line of e-liquid?
Well, obviously positively. It's definitely a net positive. It gives me hope that I can at least continue my operations over the next 4 to 5 years. Provided I can navigate, product registration and the rest of it in between. Other than that, it's really just kind of reinvigorated my want to get everybody here locally, in Massachusetts to pay attention to what's going on at the statewide level, because Massachusetts, and Greg alluded to this, Massachusetts is a hotbed for bans and regulation. So we're going to have to be very vigilant, especially over the next 6 months, to see what they're going to come up with as a result of this announcement from Dr. Gottlieb.
At some point I should do a speaking tour of Massachusetts just to be able to speak to all the vendors and connect them all and everything. But Greg, that would require me to spend more than 4 hours in Massachusetts, so it's going to be a heavy.
Well, Greg, if it ever comes to that, while and I've kind of lamented to this already, while we're still very much in flux here because of the banging of heads as far as personalities goes, I can guarantee you funding for a trip to Massachusetts. I can guarantee it. just because there is a pretty close-knit community here, even though we're only loosely formed and not necessarily legally formed right now. We can find a way to get you out here.
Yes, you're all good people, as much as they don't like your state. You show up in good numbers to hearings, and many of my active advocacy friends are from Massachusetts, so you're okay with me despite your choice of hometown.
And likewise here for Florida too. I'm not actively involved anymore with any advocacy organization, just kind of doing my own thing now. But I'm sure we could find a way if you wanted to do a tour of Florida as well. It maybe would be energizing to the shops and encourage people to get involved and help out more at the state level. So for sure, yeah. I mean, I would put you in contact with the right people in FSFA. So for sure.
Yeah. See, Tony, one of the bigger vendors in the chat, has already said he's in. Mm-hmm. So,
and I will note for those listening, my speaking tours are full of energy and talk about hypocrites and liars and rebuttals and easy interpretations of science. I don't talk much boring policy and say the word hopeful and talk about would-haves and could-haves too much.
And he enunciates
much more lively show.
And he enunciates better than any person I've seen speaking on stage as well. So,
Amen.
I've listened to too many speeches at conventions, so I try.
All right, guys. Well, we appreciate you tuning in. Greg, we definitely appreciate you coming in and joining us for this past hour. If we have any, openings in the future where Matt and Nick or one of the two of them aren't on, and we have some questions, maybe we'll get in touch with you and see if you're interested in coming back on and explaining things to us. We appreciate you taking your time to do that. Thank you guys for watching. Next week we'll be back. I don't actually know if Nick will be back from traveling next week, but Matt should be. So we'll see you guys all next week, Thursday at 8 p.m. for episode 50. Jay, we got to do something special for episode 50.
Ooh, I'm going to drink a lot.
Okay, that sounds good. Maybe I'll join you. I don't usually drink, but hey, why not? I mean, during these, I do on the weekends, of course. But so thank you guys. We appreciate it. Remember, you don't have to do everything. You do have to do something. Get involved.